Welcome to the Learning Lab. My name is Roman Garcia. This is our first video for 2016. Today we're going to be reviewing a little bit and introducing, or actually explaining a little bit better, the mechanism for tissue trauma. Now, we've all heard the word inflammation. We've all used inflammation before. We've heard it from our doctors. We've heard it from friends. Oh, I have inflammation here and it's producing the pain. I went to the doctor. I told him I have pains in my neck. He examined me and he told me I have inflammation. Now, but what does inflammation really mean? Now, inflammation is a term that's based on our current understanding of human trauma. Or not human trauma, but tissue trauma. Now, inflammation signifies a chemical reaction that the tissue goes through that results in pain, disability, and tissue trauma. Now, the reason inflammation is so popular in our current medical models is that we view all tissue trauma, all disease processes, by a chemical process mechanism. One chemical is produced, leads to another chemical, and then it leads to inflammation. Now, there is a new theory out there that is not based so much on chemical as much as is on energy. Now, in our past videos, we discussed using energies for conditions of the musculoskeletal system. So this explanation, if anybody's seen our videos before, they'll have a basic understanding of what I am about to show and discuss. Now, this new medical model that's being developed now is based on energy transference. Energy transference within the body, energy transference coming from the environment and being absorbed by the human body and thus by the human cells or the body cells. Now, I'm going to show you a picture or a diagram describing, showing that energy pathway and how it can lead to tissue trauma and how it can be diagnosed relatively early when you are starting to be exposed to an environment producing tissue trauma. Now, Carlos, if you come over here, I'm going to show the folks out there this picture. Now, what I'm showing here is a possible mechanism of energy transfer on how it occurs inside the human body. By you understanding this, you'll be able to implement strategies at home in the gym to help hopefully prevent you from developing musculoskeletal damage or even arthritic conditions. Now, this medical model, this biological medical model, is based on the delivery, the transference, the transmission of energy as it flows through the human body. Now, energy has to start somewhere. Now, it can start inside our bodies, it can start outside our bodies. Now, what I did here is I threw a picture over here. It looks like a sun. We'll call this R. We'll label it with the letter R. R means that is the resonator. That is where the energy is originally coming from. Now, this energy can be produced from 3 different domains. Now, it can be produced from the environment, from outside our body. It can be produced through a chemical reaction, both outside the body and inside the body. And it can be produced by a mechanical load. Again, outside the body or inside the body. Now when the resonator is exposed to any of these initiators, environmental, chemical, mechanical, it will produce an energy wave in a particular waveform, which is what these squiggly lines represent. We'll call the energy coming from the resonator as W0. This is in its natural resonating waveform. Now remember, this is coming from either outside the body or inside the body and is being transmitted through the body. Now, as it's being transmitted through the ether or through the tissues, and it's exposed to a community of cells, this waveform changes as it interacts with the first cell. changing the waveform. Now, this new waveform right here, we'll call it W1. What's happening is this waveform is now converting to this waveform. We call that a coherent field. One waveform is merging into another waveform, creating a different waveform. Now, this waveform right here starts to affect neighboring cells in the community of cells. Now, mind you, this section right here could be any part of the body. It could be lung tissue, it could be liver tissue, it could be muscle, it could be joint. Now, the more cells in the community starts to communicate with each other, it will start to produce a different type of waveform which will spread throughout the body. We'll call that W2, because the waveform is now different, because each cell is communicating with the other cell, and that is causing a different configuration of the waveform as it travels through the body. Now, that is a healthy state of existence. That is a state where the cells are kept in a stable state, basically. Now, when all these cells are communicating with each other, what you get is a coherent field. This coherent field spreads throughout the bodies and brings new cells to its community. Basically, every cell is communicating with every other cell. So the environment is kept in a stable state. Now, when trauma occurs, or when the individual is being exposed to obnoxious stimuli, the communication between the cells start to become affected. So you've got cells that are not communicating with each other. So you have the cells that have been isolated. They start to degenerate because they cannot exist by themselves. Now, what I'm going to show you is using modern technology, which uses a biological phenomenon to develop technological devices. I'm going to show you in a technological fashion, using a modern technological device, what happens when one cell doesn't communicate with another cell. What is actually happening, so you can physically appreciate it through a visual perception. Now, Carlos, if you allow me, let's come over here so I can show what I mean by communication between the cells, and what happens when there's a disruption of that communication. Now, what you've got here is basically a resonator. We can use this and we can mark this as the resonator. This is producing an energy wavelength, and it's communicating with a cell. We'll use this as an example of a cell. Now, you'll see what happens when the resonator communicates effectively with the cell. Now, what you see here is the resonator. Now, Carlos, if you can focus in over here, you see how the light turns on? That's because this resonator is sending out an energy wavelength that's communicating with the cell. The cell turns on. And then you will get an action from that. Now, this this energy form is able to travel through the ether, through space. It travels through our body and it travels through space. Nothing blocks it as long as the intervening matter, it allows the energy to travel through it. Now, I'm going to show you an example of that passing of the energy through a piece of matter, which doesn't change the waveform itself. Now, we've got here, this will be another cell. This is a cell in between the resonator and this cell. Now, you can see that the light, the energy form travels right through this piece of matter. This is another cell, and everything is happy. Everything is in balance. Everything is coherent. The energy is not being blocked, is not being conformed in a way that's not conducive for this cell to receive the energy. So everything is working in a coherent fashion. Now, what happens when you develop a tissue trauma? We've talked about this before in other videos. When you got tissue trauma, you got a disorganized mass of tissue. It's not in its proper parallel or three-dimensional matrix. That, in effect, what that does is it blocks energy from going through it. Now, what I'm going to show you now is an example of what happens when you've got a segment of tissue that's not organized. What happens to that energy as it's traveling through it? It blocks it. It doesn't allow that energy to flow through it and communicate with other cells. So what happens is you get like a domino effect. You're getting cells that are not communicating with each other because you have an intervening space where you've got degenerative tissue or traumatized tissue preventing the flow of energy. Now this represents that blockage, that degenerative tissue. Now, again, you got the resonator. This was producing the energy. Now, you can see that the light does not turn on. Now, when this happens, that the resonator is not communicating with the cell, so you're going to start developing a disorganized mass in that area where the energy is not traveling. Now, that's just an example of how you can appreciate the flow of energy and what happens when you got tissue, degenerative tissue, blocking the flow of energy. The resonator, one cell cannot communicate with the other cell. You get a domino effect, and then you start developing communities of cells where energy information is not being shared by the cells. So then you get this cascading degenerative phenomenon. Now, what I'm gonna show you now is that maybe answering a question that you've got that's developing in your mind right now, which is, okay, once I know that, what can I do about it? How does that serve me? Now, we discuss in other videos how you can determine when this phenomenon is occurring in your body, in the musculoskeletal tissues. So what we're going to do is we're going to review some of those biomechanical markers that can assist you in defining if you're developing degenerative tissue inside a segment of your musculoskeletal tissues, preventing this flow of information from cell to cell and exacerbating a degenerative condition which may not be symptomatic yet. So with the help of my assistants, Anna, I'm gonna go and review just some of those biomechanical markers that will help you define if this is occurring inside your body. Now, this is my assistant Anna. What she's going to do is she's going to lay on her stomach first. Now remember, for a body to be healthy, it has to be in a coherent state. Communities of cells have to be communicating with each other. Information has to be flowing through the matrix from cell to cell to cell. If you've got a blockage of that information from going from cell to cell to cell, then you're going to have the information being blocked. The light is not going to turn on. It's going to stay dark. When that happens, you start developing a degenerative condition inside your musculoskeletal area, or it could be worse, you could be developing a disease process. Now, what I'm going to show you is how, we've been through this before, I'm going to show you how you know whether you're getting this blockage of information going from cell to cell, traveling from cell to cell. Now, we've been through this before. Now, we already know that a coherent or a normal pelvis, normal hip, will not rise from the surface when you bring your leg in. Again, you see that again? We've been through this before. We've shown this before in the past. The pelvis stays flat. I know that all the cells in these hips are communicating with each other. They are in a meta-stable state. There is no inflammation, if we want to use that word, there is no inflammation inside these tissues in the hip. You can see that the pelvis rotates perfectly. The hips rotate perfectly. So I know that these tissues right here are in a metastable state. The information is flowing from cell to cell. Again, this is a biomechanical marker. We've shown this before. But what I'm introducing is a new lexicon, a new concept on how you can envision what's going on at the cellular level. Now, Ana, te vas a sentar. Now I'm going to show you a different biomechanical marker. Again, we've done this before. We've shown this before. You can sit over here. Actually, no, te vas a botar boca arriba. Face up. Now, we know that her hips are in a metastable state. Now, we've done this before too. Now, this is a biomechanical marker for the knees. The key biomechanical for the knees is the knee extension. Again, you can appreciate that the knees are extending fully. Again, this is a sign of a metastable cellular state in the knees. There is no restrictions of knee extension. Whenever the knees are in a degenerative state or in a state of disequilibrium, the individual will lose knee extension. Now, we've shown in other videos how you can do this yourself by putting your hand behind your knee and underneath your knee and pushing straight down. You should be able to feel the same amount of pressure on your hands when you push down. If you're able to do that, you know that the cells inside your knees are in a healthy state. They're communicating with each other. They're maintaining a healthy environment. Now you can sit up over here. Here. And now again, you're going to face me. And now this is the biomechanical marker for the shoulder. And again, we've shown this before, just reviewing. Again. No, you're okay. Again, you see what happens? Nothing happens. That's what you want to see. Her shoulder are in a healthy, metastable state. The cells are communicating with each other. Thus, the tissues are maintaining their integrity. If the resonator would go on and the light would go, if the resonator would produce energy and the light would not turn on, that means that the cells are not communicating with each other. So she's developing a degenerative state. This is something that you can do at home. If your shoulder rises up, you know that the cells are starting to come undone. Again, now you can sit over here. So, what have we discussed today? It's a different model of tissue trauma. It's not based on a chemical reaction. It's based on an energy flow. Now, the important thing is anybody that's watching this video is for you to understand that the key to staying healthy, the key to having a healthy musculoskeletal region is not to allow your body to be exposed to excess levels of energy. We already know the energy comes from three different sources. It comes from the foods you eat, it comes from the environment, and then it comes from the mechanical loads that you expose them to. If those energies are of a very high level or of a wavelength that's not conducive for the cells to absorb and transmit, then you'll start developing degenerative condition. Now, as we keep on with this video series, we'll keep going further and further into explaining and showing so you can get a better grasp of how to maintain your musculoskeletal tissues in a healthy state. And the first thing you need to understand is how to be able to evaluate it yourself. Again, anybody that has any questions about these videos, our phone number is always placed underneath or right next to these videos. If you have any questions, you can just send me a text message, ask a question, or just put down your questions right on the video. Till next time, thank you for watching our videos. Have a great day.